Welcome to Wildspire. You get to be a fly on the wall for my intimate conversations with entrepreneurs who are changing the world. I'm your host, Stephanie Benedetto, coach, storyteller, and unmarketer at The Awakened Business, helping coaches and change-making entrepreneurs unleash their inspired message and share it with playful unmarketing. I'll ask curious questions and explore uncharted waters with my guest today. Anything can happen when we step into the unknown of infinite creativity, and that's where we're going to play. Hello and welcome. My guest today is Steve Ware. Steve was introduced to me by a mutual friend of ours, and if I had to give him a tagline for what he's up to these days, it would probably be no BS mindfulness. What he's teaching is both incredibly practical and profound. This is what the world needs more of, and hell, it's actually what I need more of, which is why I'm really excited to introduce him to you. Plus, Steve is damn funny in that charming, sarcastic English way. Let me give you more about his professional background. Steve is a University of Oxford trained mindfulness in the workplace specialist. Although he never set out to learn meditation, let alone become a mindfulness teacher, a period of intense stress at IBM 10 years ago led him to somewhat reluctantly try mindfulness. The personal transformation was so great that his colleagues soon noticed and asked him if he would teach them. This led to Steve studying with some of the greatest teachers in the world and facilitating the first and only HR-approved mindfulness program in the whole of IBM. Within months, he had a wait list of 500 plus people globally, with graduates of his 8-week courses reporting lower stress levels, feeling happier and more productive, sleeping better, feeling less overwhelmed, and even returning to work early from long-term sick leave. Since leaving IBM in 2020, Steve has continued to bring the same transformational mindfulness courses to businesses big and small all across the world. And now I am pleased to introduce you to Steve Ware. Hi, Steve, and welcome to the Wildspire podcast. Excited to have you here today.
Thanks for having me, Steph. Excited about it.
So where do I want to start? I want to talk about meeting you. So I was introduced to you through a mutual friend of ours.
Yeah.
And what I've enjoyed, what I've noticed about our conversations is that for whatever reason, I am immediately in a quieter place when I talk with you. And that doesn't happen immediately with every person that I talk to. And every conversation we've had has been enjoyable in that way, has been quieting, has been reflective and enjoyable. So thank you for that, first of all.
Well, that's a lovely way to, should we finish it there? Because that's probably not going to get any better than that.
Oh, we've only just begun, Steve. You have no idea.
So that's really nice to hear. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm wondering for you, because I know in your story that you shared, and I don't know a lot about it, but you've shared some of it with me, that space of, quieting down and really being present was not natural for you all of your life. So, what happened? Will you tell me a little bit about your journey?
In fact, not only was it not natural, I'd say I was scared of it. I was kind of scared of silence. I was scared about being with my own thoughts. It's the toughest thing in the world, isn't it? To sit and be still and allow your mind to think whatever it's going to think, and to sit with whatever comes up, which may be unpleasant at times. It's tough to do that. It takes courage. So I spent the first 38 years of my life avoiding it all. And I would rubbish anything to do with meditation and mindfulness, partly because I didn't understand what it was, and partly because I was fearful of it. I thought, if I sit with this, I don't know what I'm going to feel like. I don't really want to face fear. I don't want to face heavy emotion. I don't want to run from those things. I want to bury those things. I want to party my way out of them. I don't want to sit with them. It felt so counterintuitive. It's almost like the Homer Simpson thing, of when I was young, when I bought this first house. It's off at a tangent already, but I bought a house and I was clearing the wallpaper off the walls. I had this horrible, we call it, I've learned in America you don't have this, but it's called wood chip wallpaper. It's literally got little bits of kind of wood chip and it's really tough stuff to get off. Anyway, I was steaming it off. It was all over the house. It took me forever to get off. I was steaming it off, and at a certain point near the front door, there was these what looked like wires underneath. And as I took the wallpaper off, I think I got an electric shock. So I thought, oh, was that an electric shock? So I put my finger back on it to see if I got an electric shock. And then I got two electric shocks. And I remember standing on the ladder thinking that was such a stupid thing to do, like a real Homer Simpson thing to do. But that's kind of what mindfulness felt like for me. Like, why would you ever sit with fear? Why would you ever sit with sadness? Why would you ever sit with anything uncomfortable? You don't want to be putting your finger on the electric shock, do you? You want to be running away from the electric shock. So I was very confused. I didn't know anything about it. I just knew I didn't want it. And yet I felt like I needed something because I was really sleeping badly. I was really anxious a lot of the time. And I was really um, existing rather than living, I'd say, back then. And so somebody did suggest it, mindfulness, that is, and I told them exactly where they could put their books and their apps and their phone. But there was 1% of me that was open to this. And luckily that 1% won through. And so I started practicing in secret, really, honestly. I downloaded Headspace. It was free for 10 days. And I only did that because a relative actually was working with Andy Puddicombe. He was in London back then. And he wasn't, Headspace wasn't a huge thing. He hadn't moved to the US. And she'd done some stuff with him in London. And she said, this guy's created this app. He's really cool. Why don't you just try it for 10 days? And so I did, but I did it in secret because I was too ashamed. I was too embarrassed. I didn't want to admit to being weak enough to need it. And then the story kind of gets interesting because after a little while, it was my colleagues at work that noticed a change in me. And at a certain point, they said, what are you doing? Because you are calmer and you are less reactive and you just seem to be a bit more centered than you were. And that was interesting. That's interesting for me now looking back. And it was very interesting for me then looking back. When somebody else reflects that back on you, that was big for me because that took away the kind of placebo. It took away me kidding myself. I wasn't trying to prove anything to anybody. And the fact that they noticed that was interesting. And they followed it up with once I told them what I was doing, they followed up with, can you teach us? And those 4 words really did change my life because ultimately it led me to learning how to teach mindfulness properly in a business setting. And I went off to Oxford University to learn how to do that. And then I brought an 8-week course back into IBM and kind of honored that request. And it all really ballooned from there because the course was super popular. It was super effective. And it ended up being the first and only corporate mindfulness program approved in IBM, which was quite big. And it kind of went viral is what the kids would say now. It kind of went viral. People heard about it, wanted a part of it. And it set me off on this journey that it brings me here.
Hmm. So why would you want to put your finger back on the electric shock? Why would you, as you said, want to sit with sadness or anger or the noise that you hear when you quiet down enough to hear yourself think? Why would you?
Yeah, you don't want to in the sense that you're a sadist, right? You don't want to because you love suffering and you love sitting with all this uncomfortable stuff. But at a certain point, you realize that the only way out is through, and that everything you've tried up to now isn't working. Burying it doesn't work. Burying it lifts weights and comes back stronger. I almost picture a heavy emotion. If you bury a heavy emotion, I picture it as a little man inside me, a little version of me that goes to the basement and works out, and he's bench pressing heavy weights down there. And when he comes back, he's better positioned to fight me harder. And if I keep shoving him down, okay, he goes back and he lifts a few more weights and he comes back. And so burying was never a long-term strategy. Self-medicating, all these kind of things that we do, whether it's overworking, whether it's smoking, whether it's drinking, whether it's recreational drugs, whatever it is, whether it's just trying to run from it, um, never worked in the long term. And so I needed something else. So the suffering I had forced me to take another look, and it forced me to listen to people who at first I didn't want to listen to, at first I didn't rate, but now I would credit with just being the most inspiring and peace-inducing people in the world. I mean, I'm thinking of Eckhart Tolle in particular. I know you and I have talked about him before. Um, if anybody listening or watching's never heard of him, he's the most amazing spiritual teacher, if you want to call him that. If you don't like the word spiritual, just say mindfulness teacher. Um, Teacher of feeling good, whatever you can play, whatever words you want. But he, to me, um, he radically changed my life. When I discovered what he did, I just had this insatiable appetite to learn more, because everything he seemed to say was true. Everything he seemed to say, I knew to be true, not conceptually, but in the depths of my being, if that makes any sense. So you hear it, and you don't need to play with it conceptually. You don't need to throw it around your thinking mind. Just reflect: is this true in my experience? Beyond what I'm thinking about it, beyond what my mind says, whether the mind says it's good, bad, or indifferent, forget what the mind says. Do you know it to be true? I mean, when I'm teaching, I always say these expressions. Don't believe a word I tell you. Don't believe a word I say in this podcast. Doesn't do anything for anybody. Believing in mindfulness is nothing. It's like believing in fitness. A great mantra: nobody ever got fit by listening to a talk on fitness. Nobody ever got fit by sitting on their sofa believing in fitness. We've got to experience these things. We've got to see what's true for us. That's all.
Hmm. So what does happen when we are willing to sit with what, at least as you were describing it at first, get quiet, sit with the silence and the noise that we notice inside of us when we do? What happens that makes it worthwhile?
I mean, that's a deep question. I would say, I mean, the first thing most people notice is just how noisy that noise-making machine in their head is, right? This thing that they can't shut up, this thing that they can't predict what it's going to say next. I mean, everyone walks around saying, I think this, I think that, and that implies a volition that isn't there. Like, you don't think, you're being thought. If you just sit and allow thoughts to happen, you've got no clue what's going to come up. You've got no clue. So saying I think is almost like saying I'm breathing, because you're not doing that either. It's like saying I'm beating my heart. You're not doing that either. It's like saying I'm circulating my blood. You're not doing that either. It's like saying I'm digesting my food. You're not doing that either. So we try out all these phrases, and one of them is I think. It's probably one of the most misused terms. So you get to a point where you see the thinking mind as this incredible thing that's taken you over. This thing that you realize that you're being used by your mind, not using your mind. And that's huge. That's huge. That's why you can't sleep when it wakes you up at 3 o'clock in the morning and wants to chat for 2, 3, 4 hours, and you have no way of switching it off. And so I think the first step, I guess, is to just notice how busy that thing is. The second thing is to never fight it. If you fight your mind, there's only one winner. Your mind is an incredibly skillful opponent. If you try and shut it up through squashing it, through forcing it, it's like holding a ball underwater for me. You can do it a little bit, it's going to come back stronger. And then if you keep going, you start to get to a place where you accept the mind's busy sometimes, quieter at others, but you just start to build this skill of placing your attention somewhere other than thinking. You realize that there's an opportunity for you, and people can do this. I said, let's make it really practical. So as people are listening to me right now, and if I slow down a little bit, it's maybe helpful. But it's possible for people, even as they're listening to me now, to start to pay attention to the fact that there's breath coming in and out of their body, this automatic thing. They don't need to change their breath. If their breath is deep, perfect. If it's shallow, perfect. But can they just notice that some attention on the sensations of breath entering and leaving the body? So you can feel it at the nostrils. If you're alert, you need to be alert for this. Mindfulness isn't about zoning out, chilling out, putting your feet up, and it's about becoming intensely alert. So I like the kind of image I like is like a cat watching a mouse. So intense alertness. Okay, I'm going to catch this next in breath. I'm going to watch it. I'm going to watch the sensations, and I'm going to ride the wave with my attention. I'm going to follow all the way in, and I'll say it out loud for people just so that they can know what I mean. So for me, it's fairly cool in this room, so I can feel coolness as I breathe in. And if I really track it, I can notice it going past the throat. Very rare for people to notice that in everyday life. My chest expands slightly. And then my abdomen, my belly expands. I can feel it touching my shirt. And then it kind of falls away as I breathe out. And if I stay with it, I can track it back up and out. It's slightly warmer as I breathe out. So that's no big deal. That's not interesting to your mind. It's incredibly boring to your mind. And the reason it's incredibly boring to your mind is we've put the mind down for a second, and most people's minds don't like that. So we've got fairly deep fairly quickly, but let me throw something out there. Anybody that just followed their breath truly, followed the sensation of their breath with their attention fully, won't have been thinking. Not possible for you to follow the sensation of your breath as it enters and leaves your body and think at the same time. We can't do these two things at the same time. So that's a beautiful discovery, because we've already established, even though we've been going a couple of minutes, that we cannot switch our mind off through force, that we can't box it in one place, that we have no ultimate kind of control over it in that sense. We can't fight it, but what we can do is gently withdraw attention and place it somewhere else. And that's a subtle but very important distinction. And when you do that, just as simple as watching your breath enter and leaving your body, you maybe have got 2 seconds of peace. Why? Because your mind shuts up, because you've taken attention away from it. And if you never take attention away from your mind deliberately, and if you never practice that, your mind will just gobble it up all day, every day. Thanks very much. Thanks for giving me your attention. I'll think about any old crap, and I'll commentate on everything, and I'll narrate on everything, and I'll wake you up in the night whenever the hell I want. And so it's about taking a little bit, I don't like the word control at all, actually, but it's about taking back some, I can't think of a better word to control, but it's like this, it's taking back this kind of, this ability to place our attention somewhere other than thought. And that will coincide with the best moments of everybody's life, right? If everybody now listening to this thinks, just bring to mind any memory you've got of feeling deeply peaceful, even if it lasted a second, an intense peace, or maybe you felt joyfully alive and you were skiing, you were mountain climbing, you were riding something. So your body was alive, but there was a deep, you kind of felt in the flow, so to speak. There was a deep peace that went with it. Maybe you noticed beautiful sunset, or your dog wagged her tail and your eyes met, and for 2 seconds it felt intensely peaceful. All those things have one massive thing in common that most people don't realize: a temporary cessation of thinking. You can't have a busy mind and truly notice beauty. You can't have a busy mind and truly feel peaceful. So instinctively, we know that we love this. And instinctively, we're all trying to create more moments of mindfulness, if you want to call it that, presence, if you want to call it that, Call it whatever the hell you want, doesn't really matter. But we all want more of it. Most of us just are never taught how. And so they either happen by accident or they happen when we book a 3-week vacation and it takes us a week to unwind. And then we have 1 week where we're kind of pretty present, lying on a lovely beach and sightseeing. And then we get stressed about coming back to work week 3. So my mission was always, can we take the elements, the most beautiful elements of meditation, and can we bring them into everyday life? And can we do that in a work setting? Because that's a big challenge.
I love the way you're explaining this, Steve, because it's very simple and it's very practical and it's very relatable. And what strikes me is how we all have had experiences of that cessation of thought.
Yeah.
But rather than calling it cessation of thought, that's what they call it in a lot of spiritual traditions and meditation. And that sounds hard, making yourself stop thinking, like you're saying, like, ugh. Like actually, it's just when you put your attention on what is instead of what you're thinking. Just put your attention on what's happening in this moment.
Yeah.
That's ordinary. And I think we have moments of that every day.
Yeah.
Little moments, a split second even. And I have noticed that I have more of these moments, and they often don't really last very long before I pop back up into messing with my thinking.
Same.
Doesn't matter. That just that touching that space and also recognizing when I'm out of it. You know, oh, I'm caught up again.
Yeah.
Makes a huge difference in the quality of my experience in life.
Yeah.
I know where I am. I know when I'm present because it feels good always. I'm present. I'm here. It's contentment. This is where curiosity arises. This is where possibility unfolds. New ideas come in.
Yeah.
And I know when I'm not there because it's constricted, it's tense, it's stressful, it feels shitty.
Yeah.
And if I know I'm there, then I know there's a possibility to direct my awareness back to this moment at any point. And I love that simplicity of something that's always with us, like our breath.
Yeah. But the prerequisite to everything we're talking about is some level of self-awareness, right? And without that, remember John Kabat-Zinn, I listened to a bunch of his stuff as well. I remember him doing a talk and he says, the problem with mindfulness is it sounds very easy. And people will kind of almost stop him halfway through his lecture and say, John, you're talking about stopping and smelling the roses. We get it. Okay. We get it. We're all going to go back to work now. Thanks for that. We will remember to be more mindful. We've got it. When we're more present, we're more content. Okay. And how do we become more present? Well, we kind of come into the present moment. How do you do that? Sense perceptions is the perfect entry point. So if I really see something, if I really smell something, if I really taste, touch, hear something, okay, I'm more likely to be more present now. I'm less likely to be caught up in thought. I get it, John. Bye. And he always says to you, good luck with that. Because if you spend no time developing your attention span, so to speak, developing your ability to place your attention somewhere other than thinking, if you spend no time developing your self-awareness, you will never catch yourself lost in thought and want to come out of it. You will be lost in this trance of thought, as Tara Brach calls it, day and night, and you won't even know you're in there. And you'll be thinking without knowing you're thinking. So how do you start to think and realize you're thinking? We're back to meditation. We're back to practicing. We're back to sitting and watching. We watch our breath for 2 breaths and then our mind scampers off and we bring it back. And then the mind goes off and we bring it back. And the mind goes off and we bring it back. And the reason we sit there and try and be patient and try and be curious and try and allow it all to happen is because it's building that muscle. And if you didn't have a wandering mind, you wouldn't have the equipment with which to work. I mean, I said to you just before we came on, I just came back from the gym. Imagine walking into a gym, paying your money, and there was no equipment in there. You'd be like, these guys are ripping me off. Well, if you can try and see your mind that way, and this is when I teach this, I often say this to people because people often think the mind is the enemy, right? The mind's the thing that keeps me up at night. The mind's the thing that makes me think anxious thoughts that I can't stop. The mind's the thing that makes me think sad thoughts I can't stop. I hate it. I want to switch it off. If I could pull it out and throw it away, I would. We're not saying that. And if you can reframe that slightly and say, well, our mind is like our gym equipment, right? Our mind is the thing that will wander off and will take your attention away. And then when you notice it, you can bring your attention back. So you can almost be grateful because it's going to allow you to build these muscles you want to build. And in the same way that if when you're picking up weights in the gym, they help you, even though it's uncomfortable when you lift them, but we do it because we want to do it.
It's interesting. I'm gonna get a little pokey for a moment, just because I've been there myself. There was a long time when I could not meditate, or I thought I could not meditate. I didn't like it. I wasn't drawn to it. I tried it a little bit. I didn't really get it. And I think that as I think back to it, I think what was happening was I was having the experience of putting my finger on the electric shock and not seeing what's on the other side of it, or not staying with it long enough, or having guidance enough or patience enough to see. And then I actually found something. The first time I ever was able to meditate and be still was after doing a lot of Kundalini yoga meditation, which was very intense. There was so much to do that I couldn't think.
Yeah.
Like it just, because in Kundalini yoga, you're doing a breath or a mantra, you're doing something physical, and it's usually intense.
Yeah.
And you're doing like all of this at once. And usually there's something you do, you could direct your attention to a certain point or something. It was very hard. But what it taught me was how to be still, interestingly enough. And I found that I started to enjoy the stillness after that. But what I didn't see, and this is a challenge that I see people who are really familiar with meditation, is they're like, oh, I need my meditation. I need my practice. I need my yoga, wherever it is that they find this mindfulness experience, this experience of being present. I need my walk in the woods because that centers me. But they have a hard time bringing it off the mat or off the cushion.
Yeah.
They don't realize that that same experience of dropping out of thought and into the moment is available no matter where we are, no matter what's happening. So how do you get someone, like how do you translate it from the practice that you're describing to everyday life?
I'd give people real practical tips. So I would say things like, next time you're in traffic and the red light stops your car, or the bus you're traveling on, or the taxi you're in, or whatever, or the bicycle you're riding, let that red light be a cue. It's going to stop your car. Can it stop your mind? And it can, if you've got enough awareness to say, okay, I'm at the red light now. Now, what do you normally do at a red light? Maybe twiddle with the radio. Maybe you check your phone if you can be there a couple of minutes. If every now and then, rather than doing either of those things, you kind of go, okay, red light, breath, 2 conscious breaths. What does conscious breath mean? Placing your attention on it and being with it like we did. So I'm sitting in the car, the red light's here. It's the same 2 breaths I'd take and follow them as if I woke up in the morning and I did my 10-minute practice before I jumped in the shower. There's nothing different. There's nothing you do in a formal meditation practice that you can't do in the rest of your life. So, and when you combine those things, that's when the game changes. Because people will say to me, the first thing people say to me in business is, even if they're really keen to do it, Steve, you don't understand, I don't have time. I haven't had a lunch break for 3 years. I've got kids. I've got to look after my sick parents. I've got to, whatever. Everybody's got something, right? Everybody's super busy. Nobody wants another thing to do in their day. People want you to take stuff away from their to-do list, not add it. So you need to be skillful and give them ways of filling their mind, not by doing different things, but by doing things differently. And that's the taking it off the mat and putting it in real life. Tonight, whenever if people are listening to this, the next meal you have, can you just taste one forkful of it? Just one. When you're in the shower for 3 seconds, can you put down your 5-year plan and just really feel that hot water just for 2 seconds? When you're brushing your teeth, what you doing? Are you playing with your phone? I would be. Can you put your phone down and just notice the taste of the toothpaste? Just notice the coolness of the water. And we can do these things, right? The mind will come in and say, it's nothing. It's not going to do anything. And it won't do anything, but everything's in the power of cumulative effect, right? If I eat one McDonald's today, my doctor doesn't call me tomorrow and say, well, we've checked your blood results and don't look good. If Super Size Me showed us this, I forget the guy who did it, but the film Super Size Me documentary, whatever it was, he ate McDonald's every day for however many days. And he started to see it. And his body started to show it in his markers, in his liver enzyme results, in his cholesterol or whatever else it was. So small habits, small daily habits can either hurt us or really help us. And we should never lose sight of that. When your mind comes in and says, what's the big deal? This guy says to follow your breath for 2 breaths when I'm at a red traffic light. Well, that's not going to take anything off my to-do list. It's not going to make me sleep like a baby tonight. He's talking shit. Forget it. Yeah, it won't do anything in and of itself, right? I could smoke one cigarette. It's not gonna immediately kill me of something horrible. But if that's a habit, if at every stoplight you do that, and if you build this into your day, and if you're dropping little moments of stillness throughout your day, then the cumulative effect is huge because our lives are made up of small things. So if you can tackle them.
What's really cool to me is that I've started to see how natural this actually is, even though normal is not this experience of mindfulness, natural is. In other words, the way we're born when we're babies.
Nice.
We're not caught up in thinking.
No.
We're not obsessing about our deadlines and how far we are compared to somebody else, if we're talking early enough.
Yeah.
You know,
sense of self, do we? No sense of self at a certain age.
So it's what I've seen, because I don't teach people a practice, and I don't teach meditation, and I don't teach mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
But what I do is call attention to the equipment we have, as you describe it. We have this mind that thinks, and we have this ability to direct our attention. And we're doing it all the time. We're just not aware of it. So we take a little bit of space in a conversation to reflect on our experience and notice, and call this a superpower, noticing, and just begin to notice. And what I've seen, that it feels so good, so much better. And it doesn't always feel immediately amazing, but it feels better to become present.
Yeah.
Than it is to be caught up in whatever stress is going on in my head. That when we notice, when I'm caught up, it feels shitty. And immediately when I'm present with my experience in my body, it's better. Even if it's not perfect, it's better. It's taking me in the direction of peace. When we really see that experientially, not conceptually get it, because you're right, the concept is really easy to get. We're like, oh yeah, I got that. Like, no, you actually have to notice it in the moment.
Yeah.
Just having little moments to notice, which could be a meditation practice, which could be mindfulness moments, which could be a conversation where we're reflecting on the nature of our experience and what's happening. Once we really notice it and get it, it just makes sense. It begins to make sense to be more present, because it's like, wow, I feel better here. But it does sometimes take a little bit of a willingness to explore and notice first. And in that noticing, sometimes, I don't know if you've seen this, it sounds like you have in your personal experience. I wonder if you see this with clients too, that sometimes it seems like it gets a little worse before it gets better. because it's like, oh my God, it's so noisy.
Yeah.
Or what I think is happening, I've started to lose my tolerance for that constant, yeah, so that even a little bit feels like a thorn in my shoe that
Yeah.
I can't get rid of. And like I notice it if I explore something specific, if I explore, say, for example, fear. Or I was exploring, I might have talked to you about this one, Steve. I was exploring a couple months ago conflict. And all of a sudden it was like it was all I could see. I could see myself creating conflicts everywhere I went with thought. And it was like, it felt awful because I was putting my awareness on something in a direction that I hadn't looked before. But then I started to see that, oh, I can only have conflict when I'm thinking it. And the minute I stop, there's no conflict. There's just what is.
Mhm.
And it was really beautiful. But I got so sensitive to every time I started making up conflict that it was like, so I think can have that experience. But yeah, let me pause there because I'm curious, like what you've seen and what your reflections are.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what because a lot of people think mindfulness is all kind of unicorns and rainbows. They think anyone that meditates, cartwheels out of bed every morning, nothing bad ever happens to them. They never feel strong negative emotions again. It's like there's this huge, yeah, can you imagine? Um, and and people think meditation is going to some happy place or it's blocking thoughts or it's and so then comes the big question, right? Well, if mindfulness isn't about replacing all the bad with good, squashing the good and just remembering a great holiday I had and just trying to positive think my way out of everything, what about the bad moments? Can mindfulness help you in them? Why the hell would I want to be more present when I'm feeling shitty? And I mean, the first bit to answer that, and let's use just a very normal experience. It's true in my experience that anytime I truly accept something, I instantly feel a little bit more peaceful. And that can be as stupid as getting caught in the rain. It's been pouring with rain here today. And I can remember coming back from London years ago. I took the train to London. It's really started hammering my rain on the way back. And I had like a half-hour walk from the station to get home. And I did have a brolly, but I met some mates in a pub, and I left the brolly in the pub. So I lost my umbrella. So I come out the station this end, and it's hammering with rain. And I started off. I had the free paper from London, and I thought I did that thing, where you just hold like a something that's clearly not going to stop the rain above your head, just hoping that one in a million time it will actually act like a proper. So of course, after a little while, this paper just starts collapsing under my head. So now I'm walking along. I've got a suit on. I'm getting really wet. I've now got a paper that's papier-mâché. And at a certain point, I just thought, sod this. I don't care anymore. I can't get any wetter. I'm soaked to the skin. My shoes are soaked, my suit shirt. And and at that moment, as soon as I accepted fully, it is what it is, I'm getting wet. That voice that said, why are you such an idiot? Why did you forget your umbrella? Why haven't you got the money for a taxi? Why don't you live near the station? You're such a bang, shuts him up. Is what it is. I'm getting wet. You can't comment on that anymore. So your voice is gone. Your inner critical voice is gone the moment you accept that. As soon as you surrender to that, and again, don't believe that. Just don't believe what I tell you here, but practice it. Practice with surrendering to little things. They don't have your dessert when you go out to dinner and you were, or I don't know, something gets delayed, your public transport gets delayed. If you can work with tiny little things, um, notice that if it's true for you, that when you truly accept something, more peace arises, even if it's negative. That's it. Because of course, we can accept the great stuff, right? If I'm lying on the beach drinking my favorite drink and life's good, of course I can accept that. And who wouldn't? but can we accept it? A lot of this stuff feels counterintuitive, but it's we're back to the only way out being through rather than putting up a huge fight, because that just adds extra layers of suffering on top of what is already difficult.
Hmm. What I love the most about this, Steve, I think, is the simplicity of it, and the what I hear anyway, and what you're saying is that just start with one little thing.
Yeah.
Just one little thing. Don't believe me, try it out. Just see what happens for yourself and really look. Be willing to notice, be willing to set aside the habitual, that nagging voice that goes, this isn't going to work. This is like, just set it. Don't listen to that for just a moment and have your own experience of whatever it is that Steve has said or I have said that seems like it might be interesting to try. Like, just try it. Have your own experience and then see what happens. And then maybe try something else and do it again. And like, really, it's so natural that when we just drop out of this thing, when we know that we can do that, we will keep doing it. I mean, this is why people get addicted to their work where they feel in flow habitually, where they drop out of their thinking and they just show up with whatever it is they do, whether they're an artist or an athlete or a coach. And they're like, oh, it's when I coach, I feel so good. Well, they don't realize that you said that thing in common is that they're not paying attention to their thinking. Instead, they're placing their attention on what's happening. So you're already doing it.
Yeah.
As soon as you see that you actually have this power to direct your attention, and you start to see how much better it feels, you'll do it more. So just give yourself a chance to try it out. And it's life-changing.
Oh, for sure.
So yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Steve.
I was just going to say, yeah, I think it's really important, and you brought it out nicely today, that the journey isn't always, linear. But my kind of journey, I mean, for people listening, I'm kind of drawing, moving forwards and then coming back a bit and then moving upwards and coming back a bit. It's not a straight line to peace here. So when you said earlier, when you sat, you were like, well, actually, this feels worse than when I didn't sit, because when I'm sitting, I'm noticing how noisy this mind is. I didn't even know my mind was that crazy. Crikey, maybe I've got the craziest mind in the world. Do I really want to sit with it? Do I really want to notice it anymore? No, ignorance was bliss before, to a point. So I like it when people are realistic about this stuff, right? It's going to be a little bit messy. It's going to reflect life, right? You'll have good days in life, you'll have bad days in life, you'll have average days in life. And your mindfulness practice will reflect that. It's not about blocking out the bad. It's not about clinging to the good. It's about accepting as best you can what is and allowing things to be and being present. And the more you do that, the easier life gets. But yeah, don't kid yourself that everyone who meditates is super peaceful all the time, and don't believe your mind when it says you're the only one who can't meditate either. And don't believe your mind when you stop doing the tiniest of things. I'll give you some examples. I stopped biting my nails. I used to bite my nails. I used to hack them down to little stumps here. I just stopped biting them when I started meditating. After a bit, I just noticed I'm not, because it was an anxiety thing. I kind of was never a smoker, but I'd think things and I'd kind of, oh shit, I need to do that. And I'd chew them down and I stopped doing it. I noticed birds singing when I walked into the office. I walked into the same office at IBM for almost 30 years. There were always birds singing. There were always fish in the lake outside. But I was so in automatic pilot. I was so lost in my thoughts. By the time I got out of my car to walk in, I never noticed them. There may as well have been nothing there. They may as well have concreted over the whole thing, because I was already inside the building in my first meeting, pretty much. And when you slow your mind down and start to notice the world around you, tiny things will happen. You notice beautiful birds tweeting as I walked in the office for 3 seconds. Wow. Wow, there's fish in that lake. Wow, I've stopped biting my nails. Wow, I'm not quite so reactive when somebody pushes my buttons. And if you notice these tiny things, honor them, because we're back to John Kabat-Zinn's those little things aren't little. We're back to Brené Brown's, I get so busy trying, I forget her exact quote, something like I get so busy trying to bring about these amazing moments in life that I miss the small moments, the moments that if I didn't have, I would miss the most. And so that's another top tip is you don't have the only mind that won't shut up. Everybody else isn't getting it and you're not. Everybody else isn't making loads of progress and you're not. But just notice little things and be encouraged by them. Don't believe what your mind tells you. I mean, that's the biggest thing I've learned from meditation. Thoughts aren't facts, even the ones that say they are. Your mind will lie to you a lot, probably. Mine does. Mine's talked a lot of shit over the years. And you can throw out the quotes from, who was it who said, I think it was Mark Twain who said, I've spent my entire life worrying about things, most of which never happened. I mean, history quotes are full of things like that. So the thinking mind isn't something new. It's probably the worst it's ever been, actually. If you look at how much we think as a species now, the stats are frightening. 6,000 to 8,000 thoughts an hour, up to 90% of them repetitive or useless. We're doing a ton of thinking that we don't need to. Not only do we not need to do it, it's hurting us. So I think anything anyone can do to pull that in a bit is helpful. Helpful is an understatement, I think, but
what I've seen is that we all function better with less thinking, with more awareness in the present moment. No matter who we are or what our skill level is. And not only do we function better, it's like there's something new available.
Yeah.
We're open to something new.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what you see, because you took this into a corporate environment. That's what you're doing.
Yeah.
You took this to IBM, and I worked for IBM, so I know how uptight and conservative and traditional they are. And sorry to anyone who is in love with IBM, but that was my experience.
Yeah.
So I imagine they had to be seeing tangible results in some way, shape, or form, or at least be willing to see if they would. And then you did this for a period of time, yes? It wasn't like just one class that you did. So what were they seeing that convinced them that this was a worthwhile investment? What results did people get?
Big ones. And I never expected them, and I don't take personal credit for these, but I ran 2 pilots just to see if people wanted this and see what would happen. And people can see these people on my website. That one of them said she'd been off work long-term sick. She came back early and she wrote in so she came back after 4 weeks of the course. She said, we're only 4 weeks in. I'm coming back from my long-term sick as a direct result of this course. I mean, I was blown away by that. I was like, I didn't go into it really for tangible business benefits. I wanted to help my colleagues out, right? Because I wasn't running IBM. I wasn't looking at the bottom line. I wasn't looking at absenteeism. I wasn't looking at, but those were beautiful side effects, so to speak. And when she wrote that, I thought, well, there's your ROI straight away. No matter how much you pay for this course, you brought someone back from sick. Someone else had pre-hypertension for a decade and his blood pressure came down to normal in the 8 weeks. And he wrote in his feedback, which made me smile, a wry smile. He said, my doctor was confounded by this. And I thought, really? A doctor in, this isn't 1975. surely even our mainstream medicine accepts now that there are things that we can do other than taking tablets that might have an effect on our blood pressure. In the way we live our lives, the way, um, and there was another lady who was quite senior in HR in a part of IBM called GBS, and she wrote to me that it had been life-changing for her and her family. So the ripple effects of this went beyond just her and her work into her family. And when this feedback started to come in, it kind of grew a pair of legs on the course, so to speak, and it started running by itself because um, enough senior people had experienced the course to say, okay, this isn't some dime store technique here. This isn't some Mickey Mouse BS. This is the real deal. And how do I know that? Because I've done it. And this was my experience. And so then it really, people listened more, and the business benefits kind of just came naturally. I mean, everybody knows what it's like to go to work on your best day, when you slept great, when you're feeling centered, when you feel like I've got this. Of course your work's better. You just talked before about, and I was thinking the distinction you were making just before you asked me that question was the distinction between intelligence and wisdom. And you can be incredibly intelligent, but very unwise. It takes huge intelligence to split the atom and to build an atom bomb. It's probably not a wise thing to do. And if we don't have access to the space beyond thinking through which wisdom can come, then we'll get so caught up in intelligence that we'll probably trash the entire planet because the wisdom will be gone. And there's so many benefits, and let's dumb that right down because I'm talking big things there. What does this mean? This means Joe Bloggs working at IBM is probably going to be a lot more creative, a lot more innovative, and drive your share price up and be more present at work. If you've got some way of reducing his stress and managing his anxiety and sleeping better and all the other things a mindfulness course can bring you.
Mm. I love that. What is all this for if there isn't a practical application that we can experience in our whole life? And there really is. And it's profound.
Mm.
I love that you're bringing this, especially to the corporate world, but at all. We all can use more of this.
Right. And it doesn't matter whether you're working for a multi-billion dollar US corporate or whether you're in a company of two just starting out. Like if this resonates with you, it resonates with you. We're all flawed human beings at the end of the day. So, whether you've got the tag of an IBM above your head or not, doesn't really make a difference to this.
Mm.
But it was the environment I knew. That's why I focused and probably still focus on corporates. It's just what I know it's the water I swam in for almost 30 years. I know the pitfalls, I know the obstacles, I know how much resistance you can get. And I know what it's like to work in there. I know what it's like to be under a lot of pressure for a long time. I know what it's like to work at a place where next week, next quarter, we're striving for infinite growth in a finite world, but which is a paradox in itself. But I know what it's like to be in that environment.
Mm. So cool. So this has been wonderful, Steve. Wonderful. And I want to ask if people are listening or watching and they'd like to find out more about what you're up to and maybe get involved, where's the best place to find you?
So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. If you just type in Steve Ware Mindfulness, you'll find me. And I have a website, which is stevewaremindfulness.com. And if anybody's The timing may be fairly tight when this goes out, but if anybody's interested in doing, I'm running one public course starting in January. So if anybody's listening to this thinking, what I'd love to do his course, but I don't work for IBM, I don't work for Salesforce, I don't work for a huge company. I'm running one course, starts in January, and details of that are on my website.
Cool. I will be sure to include a link to that, and I'm going to make sure that I get that out before January so that people can, this is January, it'll be January 2023 in case you're listening later on, but I'll put that link out. Awesome. Thank you so much, Steve. This has been a great pleasure.
Loved it. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining me for today's Wildspire conversation. If you'd like to receive a weekly Wildspire email from me filled with inspiring stories, unmarketing experiments, tips for playing your way to impact and income without the hustle and hype, insights from my spiritual business journey, and more, go to theawakenedbusiness.com/Wildspire. Until next time, may you know yourself as the gorgeous wild creation you are.